You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_Beeble and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today, we're looking at players who might be available on the waiver wire that can help you push towards fantasy basketball glory. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. Now, I'm going to do this one just a little bit differently here because we are heading towards the end of the NBA season. The fantasy playoffs should have already started. If they don't, they maybe start next week, but not should have already started. They should be starting tomorrow. That would be the ideal. Actually, it's not the ideal time. Last week was the ideal time. Again, I'll do a podcast on this in the off-season. I'll talk about all the ideal type scenarios and settings you should have when setting up a league. But what I'm going to do is look at players who have the most value short term. Now, I'm not talking about weekly, who plays 2 games and 3 games. We talked about that sort of stuff on yesterday's mini show. What I'm talking about is guys on a per game basis that when they play with how their current form, their current situations, what's actually happening with them and with their current team at the moment, how that's all panning out. These are the guys that you should be looking at when we're looking, for the next week ahead, not looking to what's going to happen on April 6th. Like, there's going to be wild shit going on then, I can tell you now. But looking at what's going to be happening over this next week or so and trying to give some value there. So let's start off with the Undertaker, Dwayne Dedmon of the Atlanta Hawks. We're not going to have Clint Capella back this week. Now, Dedmon hasn't been great of late. There's no doubt about that. He's had some foul trouble issues. He's playing minutes in the low 20s. But he still, I believe, is a player that we can look at to provide some back-end value, to block some shots, to hit some threes. Hopefully, he starts getting the field goal percentage up there. He's a good shooting free throw percentage big man as well. And those sort of combinations, the blocks, threes, free throw percentage, isn't always something you can find all that easily. He probably plays 22, 23 minutes a night as we move forward. That will drop off, of course, when Capella comes back, but he's not coming back this week. So for this short-term period, we look at Dedmon as an option that we can add. The same goes for Shabazz Napier of the Washington Wizards. They seem to be keeping his minutes down for God knows what reason, even with Ish Smith out for the next week with a hamstring injury and no other point guard on the roster. Napier is a guy that if he pushes to 28 minutes a night, he could be a top 100 guy. At the very minimum, he is a guy that gives you 5 assists per game, but he can score a bit, he can hit some threes, and I think at least for this short-term period, Napier is a guy that we want to look at to be on a 12-team league roster. That might end pretty soon, though. The next guy, this is an interesting one.
Maximum
Derek White. Finally, he started next to DeJounte Murray last game. I don't know whether that's going to continue long-term with LaMarcus Aldridge out, but we'd expect Aldridge to miss at least a couple more games, I think, with this shoulder injury that he aggravated by grabbing the net at practice the other day. They should have been starting these two together literally all season, not this Bryn Forbes nonsense. And the quicker that Greg Popovich realizes that Bryn Forbes is not an NBA starting caliber player, the better it will be for this San Antonio team. But that's irrespective of this, because White's starting next to Forbes. He is a guy that if he's playing 28 minutes a night, it's an absolute no-brainer for him to be a 12-team league guy. In fact, even over the last 2 weeks in 25 minutes, he's a top 100 player. So I don't think you can really leave him on the waiver wire, but there's a real boost in numbers coming if he does continue to start. I think Paul Washington's going to be rostered in most spots, but with how the Hornets are running things at the moment, he is a guy to grab. He does have some issues with efficiency at times, and sometimes those peripheral numbers can be a little bit lacking. And despite on the surface looking like he's playing well, he's still only the 134th ranked player over the last 2 weeks. But he's scoring at a decent clip. He can get blocks in bunches. He can hit threes in bunches, and he shouldn't be sitting on a waiver wire. Gorgie Jengs here. Probably been pretty disappointing. The first game, then when we saw Brandon Clark go down, Jenks stepped in and started next to Valanciunas and played well, and then he hasn't started a single game since then. It's been a little bit disappointing, but Jeng is a guy that if he can get 22 minutes a night, he can easily be a top 100 player. He's not getting 22 minutes a night at the moment. He is really struggling. But again, if you're just looking for a short-term boost, and this guy's going to have no relevance in maybe even middle of this week. If Jaren Jackson returns and when Clark returns, he'll have no value. But as a short-term guy, he's at least an option for now. I'm pretty confused about what's happening in Golden State with Damian Lee. They're minimizing players like Jordan Poole to give minutes to Michael Mulder and Damian Lee, but that's what they're doing. So if that's what they're doing, then that's what we have to pay attention to. Now, I do think that the last 2 games from Lee have been very outlierish, and he won't continue to be this good because, let's be honest, for the previous 60 games this season, he wasn't that good. It wasn't just all of a sudden he's unbelievable and he's a 20-point-per-game scorer. There's a lot of flukiness going into that, but still, he is a guy that we roster for now. Let's just see where it all goes, and then if it starts to cool off, you move on, and that's exactly what you do across these fantasy playoff type periods. If someone's not performing and they're injured and they're a back end guy, like if the guy's not in your top 8 players and he's injured and he's going to miss 2 games, like piss them off. There's no point holding them for them to come back and provide middling production when you could get 5 games out of that roster spot that's providing you zeros for 4 days. Like, get those 5 games in. That's what wins you, rather than holding on to an Evan Fournier, for example, who's a back-end-ish type guy who's going to be out in multiple games. Like, you move on from those blokes. And Damian Lee, if he's playing well, which he is, you add him, you try him, and you see what happens. And then if it doesn't work, see you later. The next one, the big Ragu, the Delaware Jordan, Donte DiVincenzo. Now the news has come out that Giannis Antetokounmpo is out a minimum of 2 games. DiVincenzo's been playing out of his mind of late. He is really good. I could not have hyped this guy up more this season, especially talking about his dynasty value for next season, where he absolutely should be this team's starting 30-minute-a-night shooting guard next year. He gets steals, he hits threes, he gets assists, he can score a little bit. He is going to put up a really strong little run of numbers here, with Yanni most likely sidelined for majority of this upcoming week. DiVincenzo is a guy that we grab, we take advantage of it. Maybe we drop if he goes back to 20 minutes a night. But in 24 a night, he's absolutely someone who's going to have that 12-team value. I'm not as high on Aaron Holiday, but with Malcolm Brogdon out for maybe the rest of the regular season, Victor Oladipo struggling with his hip/knee/back/whatever's going on with him, with Tony Warren Jr. being banged up a little bit, Holiday's getting the opportunities. Now, in the opportunities, he's been shit. Like, there's no denying he has not been good in the opportunities he's been given recently. Over the last 2 weeks, in 26 minutes a night, he's not even ranked in the top 180, but he can hit some threes, he can get some assists, he's worth taking a flyer on. If you don't get a Derek White or a Napier or a DiVincenzo or a Damian Lee, like, I'd say he's behind all of those guys, but that opportunity is there, and he wouldn't surprise me if he comes out next game and has 15 and 6 with 2 triples. Like, that's not a crazy line from him. Same goes for Delon Wright, who's been a big disappointment this season, but the Mavs are banged up. Tim Hardaway Jr., Seth Curry's had some injury problems, Dorian Finney-Smith is injured, and with all those guys injured, it allows more minutes for Wright. Now, he can get you some assists, he can rebound, he can get some steals, sometimes he can hit some threes, but he's at least a name that we have to look at who can provide that short-term value while these multiple players are banged up in Dallas, even if Doncic has to miss time, which is a possibility here down the stretch as well. Wright is someone for us to pay some level of attention to. The next lot of guys, Aron Baynes, again, this could be really short term, but as long as DeAndre Ayton's out, and he went absolutely bananas over the weekend. And the game before, he was a DNP CD, like absolute bullshit from Monty Williams, comes in, knocks in 9 triples. Now, Baynes was excellent to begin this season when Ayton was out. He probably won't be as good as that, or as good as what he was in that first game that Ayton missed this time, but you just add him, you roll it out, Ayton comes back, and you drop Aron Baynes. It's a simple equation that you're all well aware of. Trey Lyles is pretty hit and miss, but with Aldridge out, with Poeltl out, he's getting a lot of minutes. He is a top 100 player over the last 2 weeks, so there's no reason that he should be sitting on your waiver wire at the moment. Absolutely is a 12-team league guy for this short-term period. And let's do it one more time for everybody out here. If I could find the button, I'd push it.
Nice, Gary!
Big Gaz Harris. He is playing well. Finally, he's getting steals in absolute bunches. He's a top 80 player over the last 2 weeks. He's scoring a little bit better. He's hitting his threes. When this is happening, add Gary Harris. Get those steals, get some threes, get some points. If it falls off, oh well, let's move on. But again, I'm not talking about schedule here. I'm not talking about when these games are played or how many games, just that when that opportunity is arising, when those guys are playing, even if it's on a daily streaming basis, these are the names that you need to be paying attention to who have got some value. Dario Saric, another one of those, not someone that I would endorse just grabbing and holding through all situations, but while Ayton is out, he plays better at center. He's got more minutes now with Kelly Oubre out for the season, most likely. Cam Johnson having some issues, although Johnson could be back next game. And Saric is putting up some okay numbers. Again, an interesting stream guy, a very short-term guy. Otherwise, he profiles more as a 14 to 16 team league guy. How about this bloke?
Big Shaq.
The Bulls continue to start him over Otto Porter because the Shadow King, Jim Boylan, doesn't know what he's doing. But Shaq has been excellent in the last 2 games. Now, I'm recording this before the Bulls and Nets game on Sunday, so I don't know what's happened in that one. But Shaq is a great source of steals. He's playing very well at the moment. The Shadow King's loving him for some reason at the moment, especially with his son, Ryan Archer-Jacquino, out on the sidelines. So it is helping Big Shaq there, and he's got some value. Jordan Mclaughlin's another interesting one in Minnesota. I love the way this guy's playing. An excellent assist streamer. He's playing next to D'Angelo Russell. There's no one we're really waiting for to come back and take those minutes. Yes, Karl Anthony Towns has got to come back, but he doesn't play point guard. He doesn't play shooting guard either. McLaughlin, Russell, Beasley, they are getting the majority of those minutes because Okogie and Culver aren't very good. McLaughlin has, I think, played better than both of those guys recently. And if you're looking for assists short term, Jordy is putting up those numbers. In Detroit, with Derrick Rose out, with Luke Kennard out, we've got 2 guys we can talk about there. Brandon Knight. Actually, we've got 3 guys we can talk about there, and that's going to wrap up today's show. Brandon Knight, the Shark, Bruce Brown, and Jordan McRae. I think I would prioritize them in that order. Knight, Brown, McRae. McRae gives you scoring. Brown gives you steals, assists with some blocks as well for a guard. We know what Brandon Knight is. He's a points and assists type of player. So that is a little bit depending on what you want with your squad, but all 3 of those guys with Rose and Kennard both sidelined, they are having extra value. They are putting up 12 team. McRae's probably more of a 12 streamer, 14 team league guy, but Brown and Knight are 12 team league guys for this Detroit team at the moment. Of course, none of you surely have Christian Wood on the waiver, but look, I say that, and some people go, "Why do you say this stuff?" Someone tweeted me the other day saying Brook Lopez was available in their league and was Marcus Smart. I know Matt got a tweet the other day saying that Karis LeVert was available in somebody's league. So there are people who have not only one thumb up their asshole, but their entire league mates' thumbs all jammed up their assholes. I don't know what is going on in some of these leagues, but I do have to mention it just in case there is. Because there are advanced people who listen to this, experienced fantasy basketball people who listen to this show. There are people who have played fantasy basketball for the first time. There are people who don't even play fantasy basketball watching this show. If these guys are available, Christian Wood, Karis LeVert, Brook Lopez, Marcus Smart, they are absolutely guaranteed must-roster players. So that's why I sometimes have to mention that, because there are people out there. I can't just cater to all of the advanced people. We want to grow the game. We want more inexperienced people to come in and learn things, and sometimes these things need to be verbalized. So if Christian Wood's available, he's a must-roster player. But these guys, Knight and Brown and McRae, they are having some short-term value for the Pistons at the moment. That'll do it for me today, guys. I'll be back later on to recap Sunday's action, a big Sunday in the NBA, and then preview Monday's game. Subscribe. You'll never miss a show. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on YouTube. Now that you have, this wraps up this edition of Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Now you can tell your smart device to play the most recent episode of Hollinger and Duncan. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. Guys, that new outro messed me up. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.